That sounds fun. That sounds fun.
Hi, friends. Welcome to a bonus episode of That Sounds Fun. The seasons, is it 2024 around here? A Thursday and a Monday? Yes, and yes. I'm your host, Annie F. Downs. I'm so happy to be here with you today. Today on the show, we're answering the question, what do I do when spring still feels like winter? And y'all are in for a treat today as I get to talk with my friend, Melanie Shankle. Melanie's always making us laugh on the Big Boo Cast, one of my favorite podcasts. She tells us which jeans to wear on the internet, and she writes brilliant books, and her latest is incredible. It is a New York Times bestseller. It is called Here Be Dragons, Treading the Deep Waters of Motherhood, Mean Girls, and Generational Trauma. It's Melanie's honest and deeply personal story of trusting God to heal generational wounds so she could be a strong presence for her daughter. I know she's not the only one with this kind of story. And like many of us, has found herself at times in a winter season when everyone else is in spring. And we're going to talk about how to navigate that. I think you're really going to love this conversation. And if you don't have a guidebook yet, just go ahead and head to anniefdowns.com/seasons. Purchase yours so you can hop in with us for the spring. You'll get emailed the winter and spring pages as soon as you buy. And then summer and fall will come later in the year. And now here's my conversation with our brave friend, Melanie Shankle.
That sounds fun.
Okay, you are back on the show episode. This is your third time. So we're getting there.
Look at that. I feel so honored. I feel so honored.
As soon as we get to 5, you join the Hall of Fun. So I feel like that is just around the corner.
Okay, listen, I'm ready. I want the jacket. I want the sweatshirt. I want all the merch. I want all the
funny?
5-time merch.
We have never made merch, but you're the second guest to specifically request merch. And so we already are doing it. So it's coming. It'll be here before you need it.
Great. I'm ready.
Okay, listen, your new book, Here Be Dragons, we're getting into it. But we have got to talk about Gloria Vanderbilt jeans.
Annie, you don't even know. I feel like you're too young. You're enough younger than me that I don't know that you know the beauty of Gloria Vanderbilt jeans.
I don't. That's what I needed you to do. My connection to Gloria Vanderbilt jeans is I read Anderson Cooper's book about the Vanderbilts and how his mother wasted. I mean, his mother is where the money all went. Like, there's no fortune anymore.
Yeah.
And part of it is her clothing line. And then you're like rocking the Gloria Vanderbilt jeans. Tell me about them. What do I not know?
I'm going to tell you that swan on your jeans in the 1970s
meant everything.
It meant for a girl in the suburbs of Houston, Texas, what it meant was I have arrived. Like what it meant was welcome to what it's like to be part of the like aristocrat part of society. You know what I mean? Like it, and they came in different colors. So I had a pair, my grandmother, my dad's mom bought me a set, a Gloria Vanderbilt set. And I'm saying back in 1979, probably cost upwards of $75 for the set, which felt like we're really rolling out the big money. And so it was some aqua Gloria Vanderbilt jeans with a white swan in the front pocket. Yes. And then it had, I wish I could show you because I think my
front pocket. The swan was on the front pocket?
The swan was, it was just a small, this is elegant. It was tasteful. Gloria Vanderbilt was understated.
Yes.
Minimalist. She didn't need, it wasn't like the Guess jeans, the tacky triangle.
That's what I pictured as a big Levi box in the back.
No, it was a little swan that was in the front pocket. And then it had a matching short sleeve top that I think I took my 4th grade pictures in. I will have to send you that picture, but it's aqua and it had a little white swan that matched.
Oh, gosh.
And I felt like my 4th grade crush was named Jonathan. And I felt like if this outfit didn't really get Jonathan's attention, which spoiler, it didn't. But that just tells me something was wrong with him. Like
that's right. That's right. Listen, if there's something we tell to single purpose leaguers all the time, it ain't your guy. It ain't your guy. That's it. Yeah. It's not about you. It's about him.
It was totally about him. Totally about him.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Have you read this Vanderbilt's book yet?
No, I have not, but I'm intrigued.
He did Vanderbilt's and the Astors.
Astors, yes.
Because the question is, like the Vanderbilts had like 1 out of every $20 in the world or in the US or something. And now, and both of them went down the family line until the generation like right above us.
Wow.
And so it's super interesting to go like, how did these two family dynasties disappear?
Yes. Yeah.
It's
What
fascinating.
happened? What
So
happened?
Gloria Vanderbilt, that's the
Well,
first
Gloria-
note I took in this book, just so you know
Well,
the kind of journalism you're working with over here.
This is why we're friends, though. This is why we have been friends for so long. And I'm going to tell you that here's where
right.
you know. I haven't read the book, but I'm going to say part of it is that at some point, probably in my college years, I realized that they were selling Gloria Vanderbilt stuff at Stein Mart, and I feel like that's when you know. You know what I mean?
That's
like
when you know.
that's the end of a dynasty. Is when you're in Stein Mart.
We have a friend who shall remain nameless who had a line of product. It is not me or you, just so people don't think we're secretly talking about ourselves. Had a line of product that was being sent to a TJ Maxx. And this gentleman bought he bought it all. He said, before I'll see this in TJ Maxx and
That's
let my
fair.
product do the Gloria Vanderbilt path to Stein Mart,
That's it.
I'll put it in my basement. And my gracious, he has some product in his basement because he did not want it in TJ Maxx. I had no idea.
No.
I didn't know the other option was buy it all.
No, I mean, who knew? Who knew? Gloria could have, but she was out of money.
She was out of money. Can you
I'm gonna
imagine?
need to read that.
It's fascinating. Okay. As we're doing winter and we're into the spring, Mel, you and I are still suffering from what I'd call a sports drought.
Yes.
The winter of sports is hard for me. I'm not a basketball person, and therefore,
Yeah.
is it
Same.
spring training yet?
Yes, same.
Yes.
Now, I will say college baseball has started. And
Okay.
so for me, that's really all I need.
That's all you need, yes.
That's
is
all
your
I need.
Aggies.
College baseball. I mean, basketball's fine. It's a good filler. I don't get into it because I feel like basketball, no matter what the score is, just watch the last 2 minutes.
It takes forever. That's it. When it's 14 to 16, I'm like, why am I here?
Yeah, this is going to be, we're going to have a million lead changes.
Yes.
This is going to go. So I can't, like March Madness, I'll get into when it gets intense.
Ish. Yeah.
Yeah. But like
I've never had a
baseball-
crush strong enough to keep me in a basketball game. Never had a crush strong
Same.
enough.
That's it. That's it. It's
But
just
baseball.
Baseball is the thing. And I love college baseball. Like give me any team, any setting. Caroline and I went to Omaha last year. And it was my second time to go to Omaha. It is magical. It's just.
I feel like your college baseball love has had an uptick though. Is that true or no? Are you just more public about it?
Let me refresh your memory that I was a Diamond darling back in college.
That's
I was
right.
the bat girl for the A&M baseball team.
That's right. That's right.
But then I think we went through a baseball drought where A&M had years where they weren't as good. I wasn't as invested. I also think that there's a whole thing because when you've got a college age or a high school age daughter, we were so in her sports world.
Yeah.
Everything was about that. So that becomes a different deal too.
Yes. But now, your Aggies in the World Series last year.
Yeah.
A devastating sadness throughout the loss of all that.
Listen, it was awful. It was
awful.
awful. It
When
was
Vanderbilt
awful.
has won, it's been great. And when Vanderbilt has lost, I will never forget one of my Vandy boys when they lost still in the Supers in Nashville, sobbing on my shoulder.
Yeah,
and I thought
no.
this is the worst pain that I don't know how to mentor through this kind of pain.
It's awful. It's awful. Because you've played. Here's the thing: to get to that point as a baseball player, you've played 742 games. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And then to fall just a little bit short is just all the devastation.
It's awful.
So,
how are the Aggies going to be this year? What's your prediction?
listen, we're ranked number one currently in the country. Yeah, we're the number one team. Now, let me say, last night, this is because we're recording, they lost to Texas State, which is kind of a low.
Yeah.
Tuesday night game, you're not supposed to lose those
No.
if you're the
Those
number
are for
one team.
practice.
Yeah, but we've also had our third baseman. Listen, people are like, we don't care about any of this.
No,
but
this
Gavin
is
Grovahat,
exactly what I want. Yeah.
who is one of our stars. He's a sophomore this year. He's one of our huge stars, and they announced on Sunday that he got hurt. He's out for the season. So I feel
For the season, Mel?
for the season.
Oh, God love him.
Has to have surgery.
Is he going to redshirt? Is he going to redshirt?
I would
so he
think
gets an
so.
extra season? Oh,
I
hope
would think so. I mean, and he's a
for
kid that's
the
going to end up. Listen, he's
season.
going to be in the MLB making
Yeah.
huge sums of money before it's all
Yes.
over. But there's just your college years, you don't get those back either, you know? But I think, so I've decided I've got a fanfic narrative that what has happened is the team was really despondent over knowing that Gavin was hurt. And
Yeah.
so they just kind of had a slump, and they're gonna
Yes.
they're gonna be back. So I think we're gonna be good. I think we're gonna be back in Omaha. I may or may not have already reserved a hotel room just in case.
Why not?
You got a plan.
That's the only hard thing to get. The tickets you'll be able to get. The flights you'll
Yeah.
be able to get. The hotel is what you got to be thoughtful of.
The hotel is the thing. The hotel
I'm
is the thing.
100% with you.
Yeah,
You know
so-
the only people who quietly celebrated about that third baseman is the backup third baseman's parents.
Well, yeah. They're like,
They
this
said,
is our time.
Our boy's about to go in for this whole
Yep.
season. We thought he'd be benched this whole season. Here goes our boy.
And here we go.
Yeah, and now suddenly they got a hotel room in
In Omaha.
Omaha.
Yeah, they're ready. They're ready.
They're ready. Oh, I'm so happy baseball's coming back. I struggle, man. Once
Yeah.
football gets into playoffs, both college and NFL, I start kind of slumping.
That's it. That's it. 'Cause
kinda
it just
go, oh
feels
no,
like,
here it
man,
comes.
It's so sad. Like,
Yeah.
But I will say by the end of last football season as an Aggie fan, and listen, you've had success as a Georgia Bulldog, so I don't feel bad for you, is what I'm
Thank
going
you.
to say.
Right.
But as an Aggie, we have toiled in our pain and our agony for years.
I get it.
And by the time my best friend Gelly and I both said, because we go to the games together, like when we lost to the Longhorns, it was like the showdown. It was all the hype.
awful.
It was all the stuff. And I was like, it's broken me. Like when they sent me my season ticket thing, I was like, am I? I don't know. Like, and I did.
You did. I mean, I like to joke, and I mean this in the most joking manner. The most abusive relationship I'm in is with the Georgia Bulldogs because I go back every year.
Yeah.
I go
It's
back every year.
toxic. It's
Yeah,
toxic.
it's
I wouldn't let
absolutely
I wouldn't let anybody else continue to build up my hopes and then just destroy
That's
them.
exactly
that
right. I
way.
should use
Yeah.
the word toxic. Toxic is more appropriate. I would have left every other relationship that treated
Yeah.
me the way the Georgia Bulldogs do.
That's it.
Yeah,
you take
that's
all my
exactly
money.
right.
You take all my money. You serve me Pepsi products that I go to the stadium and drink. It's rough. And
You
then
give
you
me hope.
lose.
Yeah,
You give
that's
me
right.
hope.
That's right.
And then we go to Auburn and we lose to a terrible Auburn team. And so anyway, that's my baggage. That's
And then
my,
you make me feel guilty because they're all 18 and I shouldn't feel this strong. So then there's
That's
the
it.
guilt of it. There's the
That's
guilt
it.
of these are children slamming into each other on behalf of my entertainment. That's terrible too.
It
It's
is.
all bad. I know.
It is.
It's
It's all
so
bad.
bad, but is it back yet?
Yeah, yeah.
all bad, but
when,
is it
when is
August?
August going to get here? When is August going to be here?
Right.
It's time.
That's right. Okay, so our question we're talking about today fits right in with that. What do we do when spring still feels like winter? What do you do when you're sitting out at an Aggies game in a hoodie? And
Yeah.
this happened to me so much with my Vandy boys, where we would be in like gloves and jackets in those February and early March games because
Yes.
sometimes spring still feels like winter.
Yes, yes.
Mel, will you talk about that a little bit? Talk about when spring still feels like winter, and then we're going to dive into your story and the reason you're the exact person that we wanted for this question.
You know, it's funny because as soon as you asked the question, I thought I tell one of the chapters in the book, I tell the story about walking through our neighborhood. And it was after San Antonio had our huge freeze, which we don't have a lot of. And like everything had been dead. And I had these trees in my yard. They're mountain laurel trees and that are so beautiful and they get these great blossoms. And I looked around and as I was walking, I was like, everybody else's trees are blooming. Like, look at everybody's trees. My trees aren't blooming. Like I was so like frustrated. My husband's a landscaper. I'm like, we should have, why are our trees not blooming? Like, and it just, and for like 2 years, they just didn't. And we were like, do we cut them down? What do we do? Do we get rid of them? And then one day that it was like in March, because they usually bloom like late March. And I was walking and I turned around the corner and I looked and I was like, all of a sudden our trees were covered in blooms. It was like it happened overnight.
Wow.
And what God said to me, and what I will say to somebody listening, is there are seasons in your life that feel so barren and feel so cold and feel like it's unending. It's like the January of seasons where you're like, this has lasted for 4 years, where you've just sat and you've waited. And I think we look around and it feels like everybody else's trees are blooming except ours. But what God reminded me is I was always working on those blooms. You just couldn't see it. I mean, the roots were taken in the nutrients and the sunlight and all the things. I mean, I'm not a botanist, so but it's like all these things were working together. And I think, isn't that so true of the seasons of in our life? Because I think there are times that have felt so barren and so cold and so empty for so long. And when you get on the other side of it, you're like, oh, God was doing all these things, but I just didn't see it until I could look back with hindsight and go, look at the way he was shaping this, look at the way he was pruning this, look at the new things that he was doing. You just don't see it until all of a sudden you're like, well, look at all this fruit, look at all these blooms. And so I would say hold on, because a lot of times spring is the best of times because you appreciate it in a way that I think you don't appreciate another season because everything has been so barren for so long. And so I think God does an incredible thing with the springs, but sometimes it just feels like it takes a while.
Yes. You are our first official spring episode. Monday, everyone got to hear from Pastor Mike Kelsey as he's kind of pastoring us at the start of every season. And he said such an interesting thing around that, Mel. He said, spring reminds you that God was working all along.
That's it. That's it. Yeah.
That's it. Mm-hmm. That's it.
Yeah.
In your new book, Here Be Dragons, I texted you as I was reading it, just told you I was crying in a coffee shop. So much of it is about your own relationship with your mother. Yeah. And the way that had to feel like a winter while the rest of your life was blooming. Yeah. Will you kind of, I'm sure you've had to do this 1,000 times, but for people who haven't read Here Be Dragons yet, will you just kind of give us the overview of you and your mom so we can imagine why that was a winter as the rest of your life kept changing seasons?
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's true. Would you say it's a winter?
Oh, I think it was for sure a winter. I think it was because I think it's a situation where you're like, this just feels so cold. That life with my mom was a winter. And so kind of the premise of the book and just the story with my mom is just the realization at different parts in my life. As a kid, you don't know that your childhood isn't normal. Like, that's what I always say. Like, I think your childhood has to be really dysfunctional for you to go, this isn't right, because it's all you know. Yeah. And so I don't think that I even realized, but when I got to be in high school, I was like, this doesn't feel normal. Like when I would look around at the way other mothers and daughters were, and I was like, we don't function like this. Like there's this constant, like I'm responsible for her emotional well-being. I never know what I'm going to get from her. I never know if I'm going to walk in my house and if it's going to be a good day or a day where she's in bed or a day where she just rages at me for no reason. And so it was just this constant chaotic environment that I grew up in. And then I think after I had my daughter, and I tell this story in the book, is I remember so vividly rocking her, like one of the first nights she was home. And, you're so in love and you're so emotional and all the things. But it was just that thing of, I was like, oh, my mom never loved me like I love this baby. Like I knew it in that moment so clearly. And it was like this puzzle piece that finally fit, where I was like, oh, this is what it was. Like, she just either, she didn't have the capacity. Yeah. And so that was such a winter of my life that felt so bleak. And, you look around and you see so many mothers and daughters that are so close and, and they do stuff together and they take trips and it all seems so easy. And you hear about like teenage tension and mothers and daughters fight, but I was like, no, this is different. Like what I'm experiencing is different because it wasn't necessarily abandonment. It was just a lot of emotional neglect.
Yes. Yeah, just as I read the book, I predicted before I started it, I thought it was going to be about Caroline. Like I thought it was like Caroline. And it isn't. I mean, it is really about you. The line that I posted when I was reading the book this week, and someone said this line ruined me, messed me up, made me cry kind of thing. And it is from page 36. My mom was my first mean girl.
Yeah.
Melanie, I mean, did you suss that yourself, or did you have to be in counseling to suss that, or did Perry tell you that, or how do you finally get that language around my mom and I are not like these other moms and daughters?
Yeah, I don't think I had the language to actually know that until, and I think that's why it was part of, because when I first started to write this book, when I signed the contract for this book, I thought this book is going to be about Caroline's mean girl experience in high school.
Yes, yes.
Then as I was kind of in the middle of processing just with my mom, because my mom was dying, and so I was kind of going through all the emotions of that. And what I started to realize is I was writing the book, as I was like, oh, my mom was my first mean girl. She was the first person to ever gaslight me and to point out all the ways I wasn't good enough
Yes.
and to tell me what a disappointment I was and to find ways to do that passive aggressive where it's like, this feels like a compliment, but it's not a compliment. Like it's another way of tearing me down. But yeah, when I wrote that, but I will say, like you talk about therapy, writing this book sent me to therapy for the first time in my 53 years.
Really?
It did. It did, because it's
Oh,
like
tell people about that, because so many people want to write their stories and want to write their books. Why is that what happened?
I think it's, you know how it is when you start to dig into, because when I wrote like the first 3 chapters, and you'll appreciate this because you know Sophie too, and Sophie's my podcast partner, and she's a writer and she was an English teacher in her former life. So I send her everything first.
Yes.
And she was the one that said, hey, do you see the thread between your mom and what Caroline has dealt with and the way you had to be healthy? And I was like, oh, yes. And so then I sent her a couple of early chapters and she was like, hey, your writing is beautiful, but I feel like I'm reading your account of World War II. Like it's very like
I saw that in your acknowledgments. Yeah. She corrected you on not writing about World War II.
She was like, there's no empathy for little Melanie. There is no feeling bad. You're just telling us a story of like, here are some terrible things that happened, the end. She was like, I think you're going to have to dig into your feelings. And you know that made me put my like head between my knees because I was like, I do not want to do this.
Yeah.
And we were walking through some other hard things at that time when I was in the process of writing and dealing with some other weird relationship dynamics. And it was just like, this feels like too much.
Yeah, you're like, I don't have this to give.
No, and I'd always joked and been like, my friends are my therapist. I've got friends I can call and we can talk to and I can process with. But writing this, because I think you start to unearth, it's like a emotional archaeologist where you start to dig and you're like, oh, there are layers to this and places where I still maybe have not healed. And there was something so healing about, and what I didn't know about therapy is to have a non-biased third party say you are valid in what you have felt and what you've experienced.
Right.
Because it's one thing for your girlfriends to say that because they're always on your side.
Yeah, that's right.
But to have somebody say that who just hears the overview and is like, no, this was not okay. You know, and I just had never been able to do that. And so I'm so glad, but it is also gut wrenching. Like this past 2 years to me have been 2 of the hardest years. Just kind of processing everything on the other side. Did your mom
die? How long ago did she die? 2 years ago?
She died. It'll be 2 years ago in May. 2 years ago in May. So I signed the contract to write this book in February of, I guess that would have been 2023. I thought it was going to be about Caroline's mean girl thing. And then my mom passed away in May. And of course, I'd procrastinated. I hadn't started writing the book.
Of course not. No, it's not due for months.
It's not due. Listen, why would I write a book in 6 months if I can do it in 3? You know,
that's exactly
right. If I can't stress and make myself have an ulcer over
Homework
it,
for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, why am I going to take my time? But when my mom passed away, it became this like, I always knew that I would tell this story. I just didn't know that I was going to get to tell it now. And so then it became, oh, I can tell this story now. So
and then
it shifted
Sophie
the whole,
tying those together of going like, this is one story.
Yeah, that's it. Wow. Yeah.
I remember a counselor saying one time, it is never the child's fault to me. And I was like, wait, no, but I was like, I remember. And then she was like, it is never the child's fault.
Yeah.
And I just that one sentence was so healing for me because we can remember our choices we made as kids.
Yeah.
And we can remember things but it is never the child's fault, the trauma or the pain. It's not.
Yeah.
And so we, as those of us as grown women trying to heal into our healthiest selves, have to be sympathetic like you did in this book and like you did in this journey toward your younger self.
Yeah, because I think it's so hard because as a kid, if you've been told things are your fault, like, I mean, when my parents got divorced, I was a terrible sleeper at night. I'm still a terrible sleeper. And I was scared of the dark and I didn't like bedtime. I dreaded it. I had all these fears associated with it. So I was always wanting to go in my parents' room and sleep. And I was always dragging my sleeping bag in there. And I mean, I think my mom told me when I was like 10 years old that she was like, well, maybe if you would have stayed in your own room, your dad and I would still be married. And the way I carried that.
Yes.
And now as a married woman, you're kind of like, well, that is lies. That is so
That's an
ridiculous.
Insane thing to say to a child. Yes.
It's an insane thing to say to a child. Yeah. And so you don't realize that though as a kid. And so you take all that on. And you feel, I said this last night, I was at a book signing, and I said I didn't realize how unlovable I thought I was until I was in my early 20s, where I just lived in this place of, if people really knew me, they wouldn't really like me.
Because the ones that knew you,
that's it.
You assume it was your
And
mother.
when it's a parent, you're like, this is the person who's supposed to love me the most in the world. I mean, you think your parents are supposed to be the ones that would like bury the bodies if need be.
Yes.
You know? So it's a weird thing when that relationship is off.
That sounds fun.
Hey, friends, just interrupting this conversation. Tell you about one of our incredible partners, Nurture Life. Okay, all my friends with kids, listen up. I need you to know about Nurture Life. We have all fallen in love with easy meal delivery services, and Nurture Life is the top meal delivery service focused on helping busy parents easily feed my mini BFFs from 10 months old to 10 years old. With Nurture Life, your kids are getting a nutritionally balanced meal while still getting to include a lot of their favorites like mac and cheese, spaghetti and meatballs, and much more. Their meals are made fresh every week, never frozen, and shipped directly to your door. It's even allergy friendly too. My nephew Sammy has given his thumbs up approval to Nurture Life. You know he was the first one I sent them to, and he is a fan. Head to nurturelife.com, and my friends can use the code TSF, and you're going to get 55% off your first order. That's right, 55% off. Once again, that's nurturelife.com, and make sure you use our promo code TSF so they know we sent you. Okay, now back to our conversation with Melanie.
That sounds fun.
I have had the pleasure of meeting Mimi and Bops.
Yes.
And being around them and your dad and stepmom. And will you talk a little bit in the book? You talk about how your mom, your actual mother, just lied to you about what had gone on with your parents, and then everything you later find out, everything she said your dad did, that Bops did, was actually her.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that crazy? I mean, like, it's just the layers of it. So my parents got divorced when I was 8. My mom always tried to paint my dad as that he had kind of left our family. Like he had left us for this other woman who's my stepmom. And that but the thing is even as a kid, you're like, well, this doesn't totally add up, because dads that abandoned their family, like he still picked us up every Wednesday night. He still spent every weekend with us. He called us on the phone my dad called me on the phone every single night of my life till I think I graduated from college. Like,
wow.
Just to check in, to, how are you? You know, like there was always that unconditional love, but my mom painted him as this villain, and it's for sure painted my stepmother as a villain. Yeah. And so for years, that was the narrative. And so I had kind of this resentment with my dad, because you don't want to not believe your mom. And it was like, why would she lie about that? Right. And so you're trying to reconcile all of that. And then my dad got married to my stepmom. They got married when I was a sophomore in high school. And when they called, they ran off and got married in secret. And when they called to tell me, I just said, I never want to talk to you again. Because at that point, I felt like he had chosen this and it had been this awful thing. And we repaired the rift, because there again, my dad was he's so good and he's so solid, and like the character. And I think that can be so hard in divorced families. And I've already heard from people where I'm like, sometimes all you can do is take the high road. Yes. Because with a kid, what would it have benefited? I didn't know how to articulate to my dad, here's what mom's telling me. Yes. And also, what would it have benefited for him to try to plead his case to me? I mean, I think he knew to some extent, but what was that going to do? And I think he was just trying to keep everything at peace. And I think time, right? I think the thing a Bops knows, an adult man knows, is time will tell the truth. That's it. I just need to love my daughter. Yeah. And wow. Yeah. And you just show up and you have character and you have integrity. And I'm not going to get into the he said, she said. Yeah. And so it wasn't until after I met my husband, Perry, and he met everybody, he was like, I don't think that what you've told me about all this adds up. He was like, these people, because sometimes it takes a third party to come in with fresh eyes and see dynamics that you don't even know are weird, because it's what you've always grown up with. It's the only family you know. Yeah. And when I asked my dad, I called my dad and said, can we meet? And so we sat in a Luby's cafeteria and just Jello on the plates. a little Jell-O, a little generational trauma and some Jell-O. And basically, because my mom finally admitted to me when I told her I'm going to ask Dad everything, I was probably about 23 at this point. All of a sudden, she told me the whole story. And here's the God thing and all of that is she was so honest and told me the whole story. Later on, when I brought it back up to her, she was like, I don't know who told you that. Like, she kind of gaslit me. She was like, that's not. And then but then she was like, I should have never told you the truth.
I read that, but in the book where she said, I should have never told you the truth, you're like, yes, you should. That is literally the only thing you should tell, Mom.
Yeah. It should have always been the truth.
Yes.
So, but it was just so crazy. And I think there again, when you become a mother, and I look at Perry and me, and what I've always said is, I was like, no matter what happens between us, I would never want to turn Caroline against her father.
Right.
You know, or to create that sense of abandonment or unlovability in her.
Yes,
Like, why would you do that to a child?
Yes.
So
when you think about you and God, you know, so much of our God relationship is a reflection of our relationship with our dad. So a lot of times on Father's Day, they'll do a sermon about the father heart of God, and they will do, you know, all these kinds of things. How has your relationship with your mom affected your relationship with God, or did it?
Oh, I think it for sure did, because I think the tricky thing is my mom, I mean, you know, listen, we went to church. We were involved in church. She was in Bible studies. She appeared to be all these things. So there was so much religious guilt that was heaped on. So, you know, I say, like, I mean, I always thought, well, God sees me as so flawed and so unlovable and so damaged beyond repair. And he can't, I mean, Annie, I can't tell you the number of times I have walked down an aisle at a church or a youth camp or whatever. I mean, I say in the book, I'm like, Billy Graham would be like, girl, you're good. Like you're covered.
Settled. Yeah.
You've done it. But it just, I couldn't grasp it because I felt like she was telling me these things. So it was almost like that voice. You know, and I think we do tend to believe the negative voices more than the positive. Because on this hand, I did have a dad who loved me so much, but it couldn't overcome what I was hearing constantly from my mom.
Yes.
So it definitely shaded my whole relationship with God for a long time.
And I would imagine I mean, you talked about it earlier with seeing mothers and daughters go on trips and all these things. There is this, if my mom is a Christian, I would imagine, if my mom is a Christian serving in church, I can't tell what this is really like for me.
Yes. Oh, for sure. And I think even after I made the decision to cut her out of my life, I mean, there were women from her church that sent me letters telling me how wrong I was and how my mom was wonderful and I shouldn't do this. Because the thing about her is she was very charismatic. She could be very compelling. You know, people were drawn to her. And so she had this way of manipulating. And you're like, just because somebody sits in a church or leads a Bible study, you need to look at, do you see the fruit? What do you see coming out of their life? You know?
Do you look like her?
I do. Yeah. She's blonde. She was blonde, green-eyed. But it was funny because I even posted a reel of some old pictures and people were like, oh, I thought this was you. And I was like, that's my mom.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
So
does Amy doesn't look like you though, right?
No, we look pretty similar. I mean, I actually think Amy looks more like my mom than I do.
Okay.
But we don't look as much alike as since we grew up. But there are things, and you know how it is with your mom. You're the same way, where it's like I do things, I say things, I have mannerisms where I'm like,
I got hand downs all over me. Yeah, that's right.
Listen,
that's exactly
that was Suzanne. That's Suzanne. There it
Yeah.
is. So yeah,
Talk
you can't.
to the families. There've got to be families like y'all's where one sister can't do healthy relationship with the mom and the other sister stay. I mean, Amy took care of your mom until she died, but you didn't do relationship with your mother anymore for your own, for your health of your family and yourself.
Yeah.
How do you and Amy stay in relationship? There've got to be friends of ours listening who are like, yeah, I don't talk to my dad, but my brother does, or I don't talk to my brother, but my parents do.
Yeah.
And how do you maintain relationship with people when how did you maintain relationship with Amy?
Yeah, it's a lot of work. I mean, and it hasn't always been easy. I mean, I think there have been years where there's been a lot of tension between us. Here's what I think is really hard. I think my mom ultimately was undiagnosed, but I think she had borderline personality disorder. When you read about the hallmarks of that, one of the things they do is they tend to pit their kids against each other because they don't want anybody to form a team against them. Wow. So I was the oldest daughter. Amy was the youngest daughter. So Amy kind of always got to be the baby. And I think she was sheltered from a lot of things.
Oh, interesting.
That I was exposed to. And so we had kind of a different experience. But I think Amy, to her credit, recognized that we had a different experience. And I think we went through years where she would kind of be like, I wish you would talk to mom, or you won't talk to mom. But then mom would do something and she would be like, okay, I get it. Like, so, and then I think when mom got sick, it was really hard. But what I told her was, I was like, look, I will help financially if I need to.
Yeah.
I will help with logistics, but I cannot interact with her.
Yes.
And it's been hard. I mean, I think that's a really hard thing, but I think you have to respect what each other's boundaries are and what each other's stories. And I think you have to be honest and have the conversations and talk. And what I appreciated with Amy, like even when she called to tell me that my mom was dying, I was like, I don't know if I should go see her. And Amy was like, I can't tell you what that's between you and God. And so I so appreciated that grace and the way Amy took care of my mom towards the end, because and she was really able to see towards the end, because I think once I was gone, then my mom had nowhere to vent all of that. So Amy got the brunt of a lot of that.
I don't want to tell everything in the book, so I want people to read about your last conversation with your mom. So we'll let that stay in the book for people to hear that. But in the book, you talk about this other daughter that your mother had. Yes. And how you saw an email where she was emailing this. Tell that story. Tell that. This is wild to me. This is wild to me. The story, Here Be Dragons is full of things that make no sense. Stories that are literally unbelievable.
No, it was like, I laughed because in the middle, Beth Moore texted me and she was like, all it said was Melanie, the secret baby, in all caps. And I was like, the secret baby.
Right.
I mean, you know, like what? Just when you're, so I found out when I was about 27 that my mom had a child. When she was a freshman in college, she had gotten pregnant the summer after her high school years. And I had never known this. Nobody had ever told this. My grandmother called to tell me because my mom had decided to find the baby, who was now a grown woman in her 30s, married, kids of her own. And so she found her. And so I've met her. I know her. We're friends on Facebook. You know, that's kind of it. But I knew with my mom, I was like, there's a weird, she was needy. It was always like she needed something. And I was like, what she was hoping was that she was going to sweep into this girl's life and become this hero. And she was going to rescue her and get to be everything. Because I think the tricky thing about my mom was she always wanted us to be like completely dependent on her or to think she was amazing, but she didn't do anything. It was like she wanted unmerited favor, you know, where you're like, well, you haven't, I would love to feel that way about you, but I can't count on you. Yes. So then I saw an email. I'd gone to visit my grandmother and I picked up my mom's laptop because I needed to send an email or something. And there was an email open that she had sent to or was sending. I never knew for sure if she sent it, but she had drafted it. And it was to this new daughter that she had found. And she basically said, I found you because my own daughters have been such a disappointment to me. And I'm hoping things with us can be different. And I just, at that moment, I thought, wow, so that's like, she's just going to throw us under the bus and it's all our fault. And then I think the irony is ultimately she really didn't stay in touch with the new daughter because I think once she found her, you know, she did what she did with all of us. It didn't fulfill anything in her. Mm-hmm. This daughter had a great life. She was happily married. She had 2 boys of her own. My mom wasn't saving her from, you know, a tower where she had been imprisoned. I don't know, you know, so it just, it was just another layer of, but that was what my mom did is she was always looking for this big, dramatic, sweeping thing, which added to all the chaos.
Yeah. So you're friends with your half sister on Facebook, but no, like y'all didn't decide to do holidays together or change any of your life. Just like, glad you exist. I hope your life is well.
Yeah. Yeah, so. Just kind of, I mean, we've exchanged a couple of messages, you know, over the years about different stuff. But it's like, you know, I mean, she was in her 30s. I was in my, you know, it's that thing of.
And the connection point was your mother, who isn't like, let's talk about how great that is for everybody. So
which is a weird thing. Yeah, but the weird thing is that my half sister looks more like my mom than Amy and I, either one do. Like it was jarring to meet her and go, oh wow, like you look just like my mom. It's crazy. It's crazy.
The secret baby in all caps.
The secret baby. But I also, well, and you'll appreciate this, I also was like, turns out I'm a middle child. That explains so much about my personality. I mean,
birth order
that's
is
why
birth order.
It is. I didn't know. I didn't know I was a middle child.
When your mom passed away, did that change the season for you? Was that winter to spring? I mean, that's such grief, but it's also such freedom in this particular relationship based on what you wrote. Like, what was that shifting season like when she passed away?
You know, for me, I think spring honestly came when I made the decision to cut her out of my life. Like,
that was the big shift.
That was the big shift. Like, as hard as that was, and there was a grief, but to me, that's when I grieved the most.
Yes.
When I made that decision, because here's the thing, you don't ever make the decision to cut a parent out of your life lightly. And it was a decision that I had wrestled with for years. I had thought about for years. I had prayed about for years. But what I knew is when I get to this point, I've got to do it without bitterness, and I can't do it out of anger, and I've got to do it with forgiveness. Because if I don't, I'm going to perpetuate the very cycle that I am trying to break. And so I've got to do it in a healthy way. And so when I felt like that God released me and gave me the freedom to walk away, that was the beginning of my spring. Because at that point, I was able to fully heal. I was able to raise Caroline. She was 6 years old at the time. So I was able to raise her with the freedom that I'd wanted to raise her without this looming in the background.
Right.
You know, and I think when you cut a parent out, because I did end up getting to see my mom at the end of her life, but when I made that decision, I thought, I really am saying, she's gone to me. Like this, we're done. And so I didn't know that I would ever get to say goodbye to her. So I had to be okay with that. So that to me was spring.
So what does that feel like? Talk about the grief. I think sometimes people think when we change seasons that it's just like relief. But I think there is often grief in a season shift like that too. So will you talk about that? That feels like where salt water meets like a delta, where salt water meets freshwater, where there's grief and joy in that.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's it, is you can feel both things. Like I was like, I can feel so relieved, which I did, to finally cut that relationship off and be like, I don't have to worry about this anymore. I don't have to wait for the phone to ring. But yet also it was grief, not for what was, but for what could have been. And I think that's the story of the grief with my mom, is I'm like, this could have been so different. It should have been so different, but it just wasn't. And so there's a sadness there and I think that was a part of me, is even after I cut my mom out, there's part of me that always felt bad for her. Like I felt grief for her, because I was like, you continually find ways to throw away your chance at happiness with both hands. Like you're your own worst enemy always. She was a master of sabotage in her own life. And so, and you know, she had even told me that I caused her more pain than anything else in her life, was one of the things she said to me. And, but I knew the truth by that point, because I was about 30 when she said that. And I was like, no, but the truth is you've caused your own self so much pain that I can't take that on. That's not me. But I do think it's hard to, you know, it's like every new beginning means that something else is ending, and there's grief for that. And there's sadness in that. And so you can feel the joy and the relief. I think both of those things can be true.
And she missed out on Caroline, who is a pure pleasure of a person.
What a delight. Listen, I know she's mine, and I know I'm biased, but golly, what a little firecracker she is.
So you started writing this when Caroline's already in college.
Yeah.
And you're backing up and writing about her mean girl experiences at school, which were extreme.
They were awful.
I think, Mel. I mean, so talk to our friends listening who are raising daughters who are experiencing mean girl things at school. How did you not move? How did you not pick up and switch school? Like, how did you learn when to teach resilience and perseverance versus getting her out of there?
I think that's the hardest thing, Annie. Like, here's what I said. I was like, if I could write a 10-step guide to here's how to help your daughter deal with mean girls, the end. But there's just not, because so much of it depends on your daughter's temperament and her personality, her emotional resilience, what she can handle. And I will say, I relied so much on my relationship with Jesus in that time, because I needed his wisdom, because I was like, I don't know how long because Perry and I have raised Caroline where it's like, we've always been like, she came out of the womb a fighter. So we're like, she's a fighter. She's strong. She advocates for herself. She knows how to do this. And so, but then all of a sudden, when you start to watch her spiral, I was like, oh, this is taking a toll. I mean, because for anybody, there's only so much you can take.
Right.
And so I kept praying. We were praying, like, do we take her out of school? Do we move schools? Do we, and everything in us agreed. God was like, stay the course. Like, stay the course. And Caroline would say, I don't want to do that. Like, I can hang, but I think as a mom or as a parent, you have to kind of look for the signs. And we stuck really close to where she was. And
I love when Perry told her to fight back.
Listen,
when he said, if they do it again, punch her in the face and we'll be fine with it.
Yeah, he was like, and that's where you need to know your kid, because I kept saying, because my personality is just be kind, take the high road, just keep being yourself, just whatever. And when she came home one day and she was at such a low, and Perry was like, no, this is war. He was like, this is war. He was like, you fight back. And like a light came on for her, because she needed to know that she could fight. And that gave her the freedom to stand up for herself.
Yeah.
And here's the
Did she ever punch anybody in the face? I know in the book you tell the story that she told the administration and that helped, but did she also punch anybody in the face?
She didn't. I wish she would have liked to. She didn't.
Yeah,
I know. I wish she would have.
That's all right. That's respectful. That's very respectful.
Listen, you'll appreciate this as a former teacher. I got the sweetest email from her elementary school teacher who Caroline had for 3 different grades, who just finished reading the book.
I remember when she looped with him, and I was so jealous because I had wanted to loop with the class that I was teaching.
Yeah. And so she looped with Caroline. So Caroline was a bridesmaid in her wedding. I mean, but I got a text from her yesterday and she was like, Melanie, I did not know that all this went on in high school. She was like, who are these girls? We ride at dawn.
Yeah.
And I was like, yes, let's go. Like, but here's what I will say. If your daughter is going through this, it is gut-wrenching. Here's what nobody tells you. It's infinitely harder to watch your child go through it than it was for you to go through it yourself. Like, it's so, because you feel so powerless and you don't know what to do. But here's what you do. You stick close. You make your home their safest place. You make sure that they know that they are loved and valued. You protect them. You give them safe spaces to talk to. You let them know who they are. And what I will say is, now on the other side of it, God built so many incredible things in Caroline during that season. And she would say now, like, she's like, I wouldn't trade it. Like, as hard as it was, I wouldn't trade it, because it's given her a kindness that she wouldn't have had. It's given her empathy. It's given her compassion. She looks for the person that needs a friend or is feeling left out.
Yeah.
And I think the thing is, Annie, and this is what I say, is God has to build character and resilience in all of us. And what I've told Caroline, I was like, here's the problem, kid. You were born to 2 parents who love and adore you. Like, you were raised in a home where you never doubted for a minute. We would watch you do a load of laundry and be like, this is amazing. Oh my gosh, look at the way you separated those whites and darks. And so I was like, God had to build something in you.
Yeah.
To equip you for what he's calling you to be. And that was through these relational dynamics that were so hard.
Yes.
That sounds fun.
And now back to finish up our conversation with Melanie.
That sounds fun.
In the book, you talk about a time where you called another mother that was of a girl who was a mean girl.
Yeah.
There are some of our friends listening whose daughters are choosing those behaviors. Mm-hmm. What do you say to the moms who have gotten the phone call on the other side? What do you say to the moms who are raising the girls who are, I don't want to say they're raising mean girls because that's not
Yeah.
the fullness of who their daughters are.
Yeah.
But they are raising girls who are at times choosing the behavior that leaves people out on purpose.
Yeah.
What do you say to those moms?
I mean, I think number one, I think you have to recognize, I think part of high school is there's so much emotional immaturity.
Yeah.
And I think the girls don't know. And I think that a lot of times it's like they don't even, as long as they're not the target, they're okay with, I just want to be in this group of friends. Like I just want to be in this group and I want to fit in this group. But I think
Yes.
as moms, and I did this with Caroline because I was like, I never want to be the mom that's like, my kid would never, because it's like, you've got to
Yes.
take an honest look at
Yes.
who your kid is. And I think you pay attention to if Katie's always been at your house and all of a sudden Katie's not around, where is Katie? What happened?
Yes.
And I think to talk to them about, do you think this is kind? Do you think this is the way Jesus would treat somebody? Like, is there a way? You don't have to be best friends with somebody, but we know that. I mean, there are people you really click with and people that you just don't. But it's like,
Yes.
guess what? We're going to treat everybody with kindness. We're not going to make someone feel less than. We're not going to tear another person down. And you know what I say, like in this case with the mom that I contacted, I mean, these text messages that her daughter was sending Caroline, like I couldn't even put some of them in the book because they were so vile. Like some of the things.
Oh my gosh,
that
and you
she
put
said,
vile ones in the book.
but it was so toxic and so hateful
No.
and where the daughter was actually admitting, like, I will tell whatever lies I have to tell. I will destroy you. And the fact that this mom was like, well, this just girls are going to be girls.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, here's what I would have done. Caroline Shankle wouldn't have had a phone. She wouldn't have a phone
She
now.
still wouldn't.
She
That's
wouldn't-
exactly right.
She still wouldn't have a phone. I'd be like, pick up a tin can with
Yeah.
a string because
Send
that's
a
the only
letter.
phone.
Send a
That's
letter, but I'm
it.
going to read it first.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
that's
I'm
right.
cutting you out. And that's where
Yeah.
it's like, it's okay to be the parent. And I think that's where you have to step in. And if you have to ground them within an inch of their life and be like,
Yeah.
you know what, you're done. Like,
Yeah.
you're not on social media. I'm taking your phone. And I think that goes on both sides of the mean girl
Yes.
thing, whether your daughter's the one being targeted or your daughter's the one targeting.
Yes.
That to me becomes such a wild, wild west of people just being able to constantly berate you.
Yes.
That it's like we're shutting it down. Guess what? You don't have to be on Instagram. You don't have to be on Snapchat.
That's right.
You really don't have to have a phone. And so
Yes.
that's where you get to step in and be the parent. And if you're the bad guy, you're the bad guy, but you're also
guy.
protecting them from other people and themselves.
Yes.
So don't be afraid to do that.
The other thing I've seen, I'm sure you've seen this too, is I have a friend whose daughter started to show signs of mean girl behavior when she was finishing middle school, going into high school. And the mom had to reconcile, I was like this too. And the mom
yeah.
had to have this moment of, the reason my daughter's doing this is I did
Yep.
that. And these were my insecurities that made me unkind. And
Yes.
so that's the other thing I'd encourage any of our friends. I'm the least mom on this call. But so I'm not a mom. I'm not a mom. I'm not a mom.
No,
but I've
but
watched,
you know girls.
yeah, I've been a girl my whole life. And I've
Yeah.
watched one of my up close friends have to have a real come to Jesus with herself because
Yeah.
her daughter was getting away with things that were birthed out of my friends' insecurities.
Yes. Yes.
And so I think
And
there's
that's-
times when we need to look at us.
Yes. And you see so much of that. I think now more than ever, there's so much social engineering by the moms because they want their daughter to be a part of this group or to be a
Yes,
part of this thing. And that
yes.
goes back to our own insecurities and our own need to fit in. And it's like,
Yeah.
we've got to teach our daughters to do better, but we have to examine our own because if they see us treat our peers as competition, we're teaching them to see their peers as competition.
That's right.
And
That's right,
just
Melanie.
to be like, one woman's success does not diminish any potential
right.
success or accomplishments we can have.
That's exactly
So-
right. That's exactly right. That's so good. It just so often comes back to why did I feel? Why am I parenting this way? What am I actually trying to fill in myself? I mean, I do it with my nephew
Yeah.
Sammy, where I'm like, wait, the reason I want him to do that is because I want to do it. Like, what am I doing? What am I
Yes.
doing? What am I doing?
Oh.
Yeah. And I'm not even
That's
raising
it.
him full time.
No, I mean, I feel like Caroline, when we got to, I was like, so you really don't want to play soccer in college? You really don't? And she was like, no, I don't. And I had to be like, okay. All right, this is not about you anymore. This has become about me wanting to keep
Yes,
watching you play
yes.
soccer, and that's not fair. Yeah,
That's right. And she is very good at soccer.
she is.
right here where we are in the podcast of switching from winter to spring. I mean, y'all went through that when Caroline moved out after high school. And now is she done with college or is this her senior year?
She graduates in May. So she's graduating in May.
Right. And so you are continually, which I think y'all are going to be our first mother-daughter to have 2 episodes on That Sounds Fun, by the way. So, because I've got to have her on. Doesn't she have a book coming out this fall? Is that right?
October 14th, her book comes out. Yeah. Buckle up. It's good.
I can't wait. Just reading her testimony in the back of Here Be Dragons, I was like, oh, this girl can write.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit to some of our mom. I mean, there's got to be friends of ours listening whose kids are graduating for the first time coming in May. Like this is their first kid graduating, or they're about to empty nester / free birds, as you and Perry call it. Talk a little bit about the joy and grief, the Delta mix right here of when your kids switch seasons in your home.
Yeah. It's funny because I think it's the thing that you dread. Like I remember so vividly Caroline being a newborn and thinking like, I can't send her off to college like this. Yeah. I can't certainly I need Jesus to come back before this happens. Right. And then all of a sudden it's here. And, it's such a cliche to go, it goes so fast, but it goes so fast.
Yeah.
And you look up and it's time. And with Caroline, it was different because high school had been so hard that I think by the time it was time for her to leave for college, I was like, go. You need to go. You need to go live your life. You need to meet your people. And I do think that's where God is so gracious and given us teenagers that as they turn 16, 17, 18, you start to have that push and pull of wills and they're wanting more freedom. And so it does make you incrementally ready to see them go.
Yes.
And there's something so beautiful in watching them go. Like I will say that my hope and encouragement is this has been like one of my favorite seasons of life in terms of, it really has. Like I love having a college kid. This is the payoff of, and it's funny because even with the timing of this book, I told Perry, I said, it's funny how God does this because Caroline needed to be 21 before I told this story because it's almost like until she was fully formed to be like, we've overcome this generational dysfunction and trauma, but I don't know how my own kid is going to turn out.
Yeah, that's right.
And now as a 21-year-old, I'm like, I see who she is. I see who she is in Christ. I see the way she lives her life. Like we've done it. Like with God's grace, we've done it.
Yeah.
And so I think there's something so beautiful of getting to see like, who are they going to be when they get out of high school and they're on their own and the decisions they make and the friends they make and the stuff they decide to do? And there's something so fun about that. And then there's also something so fun in rediscovering, like with Perry, because our lives, whether you want to or not, you're so kid-centric. I mean, everything was about soccer games and her stuff and all that stuff. And there's something so fun about this stage of being like, well, it turns out I still really like you. What a treat this is that we still make each other laugh. And I remember why we got married in the first place. And listen, I see now why people go to dinner at 4:30 because the nights that like at 4:30, we're like, you hungry? You want to just go ahead and go eat? Like, why not? We can do whatever we want to do. So there's something really sweet in it, even though there's the grief of it's not what it used to be.
Yeah.
And there are times it can feel a little, I think it can feel a little sad because you're just like, man, those were great years. But I also think the empty nest thing is such a myth because I'm like, I talk to Caroline more now. I mean, she calls
her senior year. I bet.
Yeah.
I bet.
Like 5 times a day. Hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? What should I wear to this? Do you think my hair looks good? What should I do about this? Like whatever. And then, and she's like this summer, she was like, oh, I'm coming home this whole summer and going to be a sloth. This is going to be my summer of sloth. So they develop an appreciation for you and home that I don't think they have until they leave your house.
Yeah. I'll tell you as the unmarried, no kids person, I feel like, because my friends are our age, right? Like my friends are our age. So I feel like suddenly y'all are all back. Social lives are back. Like it feels like, I didn't realize how much that I feel like y'all have all, children are not prison. Children are lovely. I think they're amazing.
Yeah.
It feels like y'all have all gotten released. And now you do things at night again.
Yeah. Listen, we're free.
So fun. funny. I was FaceTiming with a couple last night talking about all the stuff we're going to do when I'm home in Nashville because their kids are out of their house. And I'm like, man, for the last 10 years, we've been, I'd love to come to a basketball game. Let's go eat on Saturday afternoon with all the kids. And now they're like, do you want to see a movie? I'm like, welcome back, everybody.
Yeah, that's it. Listen, all of a sudden, you're like, I can do whatever I want to do. Yes. I told Perry, I got home last Sunday and I had been traveling and I was like, I'm sleeping tomorrow until I wake up. And he was like, how is that different from every day of your life now? And I was like, well, it's not, but I just wanted to state it for the record.
I'm saying it again.
I'm just saying
this time there's a reason behind it. The others are by choice. This is a reason. Oh, Mel, I cannot wait for people, if they have not read Here Be Dragons, to get it. I've read every one of your books and I love your writing. You know that I was a fan before I was a friend, but this one is so, it's so fine. It's so finely done. It's just
thank you.
It is a real feat. So thank you for what it has cost you to tell this story. It is going to set so many women free to be who they want to be.
And that's really, you know, it's funny because it's the book I always knew I would write someday. And I feel like my prayer for it has been is that it would bring hope and healing and encouragement, because I think there are, and I've already heard from so many people that were like, I felt so alone in this, because nobody talks about it, because you feel like people are going to automatically judge you if you say this relationship is toxic or I had to cut this person out. And so, you know, I hope that's what people find in the pages. But listen, you know, I adore you. You've been one of my very favorites since you were little baby Annie in your 20s.
That's exactly right. I mean, we really are getting close to knowing each other for 20 years, right?
Yeah.
I think
we
it's
really
like
are.
06.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean,
5
we're
or
real
6.
close.
That is.
Yeah. So between that,
gift.
I mean,
Thanks
I'm for
be to
sure going to
God.
need some merch. For 5 times and knowing you for 20 years. I feel like I need the merch.
That's exactly right. Okay. The last question we always ask, because the show is called That Sounds Fun, Melanie Shankle. Tell me what sounds fun to you. What are you doing for fun?
Well, right now I'm in the middle of book stuff, but my best friend Gully is with me, so we're having the best
is she
time.
in the
If I
room?
can turn around. No, she's downstairs. She went and met some other
If
friends
she
for
was in
lunch
the room,
while
I would
did
make
this.
her be on the podcast so bad. I love her so much.
And you know she would. Listen, you know, we always laugh because Gully anywhere, we laugh because if people are like, are you Gully? She's like, I am. You know, that's her. Like, yes, I am. So she's traveling with me. Listen, we have packed, you wouldn't even believe the smorgasbord of snacks. So that is so fun with me, just to be on the road and have unlimited time. We talked so long yesterday that I was like, my throat is sore and I have like 2 speaking engagements and a book signing.
What a gift.
Just catching up on life. It's so fun. And then what I would like to do that sounds amazing right now, I would like to be in a cabin in the mountains with just some good books and some good coffee. And like a transition to a bottle of wine in the evening.
Have you seen this new thing? These women who are doing reading retreats where you literally rent a cabin with a couple of your friends and all y'all do is read all day and then eat your meals together?
Listen, I would 100% do this. I would. You know, Sophie hosted a silent reading party at her house a couple of weeks ago where they did. She had friends over. They all read their books for 45 minutes. Then they all had snacks, talked about their books. I'm like, that sounds like the nerdiest, best thing.
I'm like in my next life, we don't believe in next lives. In my next life, my next career choice is going to be a hotel that's just for women who want to read. I'm going to get an Airbnb for women or a bed and breakfast for women who just want to read.
Yeah. Book me a room for that. When Sophie and I started writing our books, we went and stayed with Aaron Moon up in a cabin in Highlands, North Carolina for a week. Yeah. And Perry called it a loser's retreat. He was like, how's your loser's retreat going? And I was like, listen, I will go on a loser's retreat anytime.
That's right.
Reading, writing, all the things. Let's do it. That sounds fun to me.
That's it. Well, thanks for being here. Thanks for Here Be Dragons, Mel. I love you. I'm really, really grateful.
Thank you, Annie. I love you so much.
Oh, y'all, isn't she awesome? What an incredible story. As you heard me say in the show, I just was teary reading through this book before we got to talk. It's just an incredible read, a really beautiful memoir, very honest. It's your next favorite book. Make sure you grab your copy of Here Be Dragons wherever you love to buy books. And make sure you head over to social media. Tell Melanie thank you for being on the show and thank you for your honesty. If you enjoyed this episode, you can go back and listen to episode 918 with Melanie's co-host of the Big Boo podcast, Sophie Hudson. And there are multiple episodes with Sophie and Melanie back in our history, so check those out. If you have any questions from this episode, you can drop them in the Q&A box on your Spotify app if you're a Spotify listener like me or watcher. Don't forget you can watch us on Spotify now too, just like you can watch these episodes on YouTube. Or if you have other questions, you can send them to us on Instagram at That Sounds Fun Podcast. We will answer them for you there. If you need anything else from me, you know I'm embarrassingly easy to find. Annie F. Downs on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, anywhere you need me, that is where you can find me. I think that's it for me today, friends. Go out or stay home. Do something that sounds fun to you, and I will do the same. Today, what sounds fun to me is a weekend at home in Nashville. I cannot wait. I cannot wait to be home in Nashville for this weekend. Y'all have a great weekend. Make sure you get some rest, and we'll see you back here on Monday as we continue in the spring transition. We're loving that spring is here with Pastor Levi Lesko. We'll see y'all then.
That sounds fun. That sounds fun. Oh, that sounds fun. Check 1, 2 on the microphone. Annie F. Downs in your car to your home. Every week it's something new. A deep talk or an interview. She'll make you laugh, she'll make you cry. When it's dark out, she's a light. When you're down, get you feeling right. Oh man, that sounds fun. That sounds fun. That sounds fun. Oh.